Hello, everyone. This is JCK from Quantum Truths JCK, and I'm reading the first book, Anastasia, from the Ringing Cedars of Russia series. And this has been written by Vladimir Megre and translated by John Woodsworth. So we are up to chapter 2. And I would suggest that as you listen to this, that you sit in a quiet place, maybe in nature while you listen, and enjoy the next several minutes as I read chapter 2 of Anastasia. Chapter 2, Encounter. Without a word to anyone, I arranged to have the ship stop not far from the place where I had met the old men the previous year. Then I took a small motorboat and reached the village. I gave orders to the captain to continue along the trade route. I hoped I would be able, with the help of the local residents, to look up the two old fellows, see the ringing cedar with my own eyes, and determine the cheapest way of getting it back to the ship. Tying the motorboat to a rock on the shore, I was about to head for one of the little houses close by, but spotting a woman standing alone on the riverbank, I decided to approach her. The woman had on an old quilted jacket, long skirt, and high rubber galoshes of the kind worn by many residents of the northern backwoods during the spring and the fall. On her head was a kerchief, tied so that the forehead and neck were fully covered. It was hard to tell just how old this woman was. I said hello and told her about the two old men I had met here the previous year. It was my grandfather and great-grandfather who talked with you here last, Vladimir, the woman replied. I was amazed. Her voice sounded very young. Her diction was crystal clear. She called me by my first name and right off used the informal form of address. I couldn't remember the names of the oldsters or whether we had introduced ourselves at all. I thought now we must have done so since this woman knew my name. I asked her, deciding to continue in the same informal tone. And how do you call yourself? Anastasia, the woman answered, stretching out her hand toward me, palm down, as though expecting me to kiss it. This gesture of a country woman in a quilted jacket and galoshes, standing on a deserted shore and trying to act like a lady of the world, amused me no end. I shook her hand. Naturally, I wasn't going to kiss it. Anastasia gave me an embarrassed smile and suggested I go with her into the taiga to where her family lived. The only thing is, we'll have to make our way through the taiga, 25 kilometers. That's not too much for you. Well, of course, it's rather far. But can you show me the ringing cedar? Yes, I can. You know all about that. You'll tell me. I shall tell you what I know. Then let's go. Along the way, Anastasia told me how their family, their kin, had been living in the cedar forest generation after generation, as her forebears had said, over the course of several millennia. It is only extremely rarely that they find themselves in direct contact with people from our civilized society. These contacts do not occur in their places of permanent residence, but only when they come into the villages under the guise of hunters or travelers from some other settlement. Anastasia herself had been to two big cities, Tomsk and Moscow, but only for one day each, not even to stay the night. She wanted to see whether she might have been mistaken in her perceptions about the lifestyle of city people. She had saved the money for the trip by selling berries and dried mushrooms. A local village woman had lent her her passport. Anastasia did not approve of her grandfather and great-grandfather's idea of giving away the ringing cedar with its healing properties to a whole lot of people. When asked why, she replied that the pieces of cedar would be scattered among evildoers as well as good people. In all probability, the majority of the pieces would be snatched up by negative thinking individuals. In the final analysis, they might end up doing more harm than good. The most important thing, in her opinion, was to promote the good and to help people through whom the good was accomplished. If everyone were benefited at random, the imbalance between good and evil would not be changed, but would stay the same or even get worse. After my encounter with the Siberian oldsters, I looked through a variety of popular science literature, along with a host of historical and scholarly works describing the unusual properties of the cedar. Now, I was trying to penetrate and comprehend what Anastasia was saying about the lifestyle of the cedar people, and thinking to myself, now, what, if anything, can that be compared to? I thought about the Likovs, a true story many Russians are familiar with, from the account by Vasily Peskov of another family that lived an isolated life for many years in the taiga. They were written up in the paper Komsomolskaya Pravda under the headline Dead End in the Taiga, and were subject of television programs. I had formulated for myself an impression of the Likovs as people who knew nature pretty well, but had a rather fuzzy concept of our modern civilized life. But this was a different situation. Anastasia gave the impression of someone who was perfectly acquainted with our life and with something else besides that I couldn't fathom at all. She was quite at ease discussing our city life. She seemed to know it firsthand. We walked along, getting deeper into the woods, and after about 5 kilometers, stopped to rest. At this point, she took off her jacket, kerchief, and long skirt, and placed them in the hollow of a tree. All she was wearing now was a short, lightweight frock. I was dumbstruck at what I saw. If I were a believer in miracles, I would put this down to something like extreme metamorphosis. For now here before me stood a very young woman with long golden hair and a fantastic figure. Her beauty was most unusual. It would be hard to imagine how any of the winners of the world's most prestigious beauty contests could rival her appearance, or, as it later turned out, her intellectual prowess. Everything about this taiga girl was alluring, simply spellbinding. "You are probably tired?" asked Anastasia. "Would you like to rest for a while?" We sat right down on the grass, and I was able to get a closer look at her face. There were no cosmetics covering her perfect features. Her lovely, well-toned skin bore no resemblance to the weather-beaten faces of people I knew who lived in the Siberian backwoods. Her large greyish-blue eyes had a kindly look, and her lips betrayed a gentle smile. As indicated, she wore a short, lightweight smock, something like a nightshirt, at the same time giving the impression that her body was not at all cold, in spite of the 12 to 15 degree temperatures. I decided to have a bite to eat. I reached into my bag and took out sandwiches, along with a travel bottle filled with good cognac. I offered to share it with Anastasia, but she refused the cognac, and for some reason even declined to eat with me. While I was snacking, Anastasia lay on the grass, her eyes blissfully closed, as though inviting the sun's rays to caress her. The rays reflected off her upturned palms with a golden glow. Lying there half exposed, she appeared absolutely gorgeous. I looked at her and thought to myself, why do women always bear to the limit either their legs or their breasts or everything at once with their miniskirts and décolletage? Is it not to appeal to the men around them, as if to say, look how charming I am, how open and accessible? And what are men obliged to do then? fight against their fleshly passions and thereby denigrate women with their lack of attention, or make advances towards them and thereby break a God-given law? When I had finished eating, I asked, Anastasia, you're not afraid of walking through the taiga alone? There is nothing I have to fear here, replied Anastasia. Interesting, but how would you defend yourself if you happened to encounter 2 or 3 burly men, geologists or hunters, let's say? She didn't answer, only smiled. I thought, how is that this so extraordinarily alluring young beauty could not be afraid of anyone or anything? What happened next still makes me so uncomfortable, even to this day. I grabbed her by the shoulders and pulled her close to me. She didn't offer any strong resistance, although I could feel a considerable degree of strength in her resilient body. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was her saying, "Do not do this. Calm down." And even before that, I remember being suddenly overcome by a powerful attack of fear. A fear of what? I couldn't grasp. Sometimes happens in childhood when you find yourself at home all alone and suddenly become afraid of something. When I woke up, she was on her knees bending over me. One hand lay upon my chest while the other was waving to someone up above or to either side. She was smiling, though not at me, but rather, it seemed, at someone who was invisibly surrounding us or above us. Anastasia seemed to be literally gesturing to her invisible friend that there was nothing amiss going on, and she calmly and tenderly looked me in the eye. "Calm down, Vladimir. It is over now." But what was it? I asked. Harmony's disapproval of your attitude towards me, of the desire aroused in you. You will be able to understand all later. What's Harmony got to do with it? It's you. It's only that you yourself began to resist. And I too did not accept it. It was offensive to me. I sat up and pulled my bag over toward me. Come on now. She didn't accept me. It was offensive to her. Oh, you women. You just do everything you can to tempt us. You bare your legs, you stick out your breasts, walk around in high-heeled shoes. That's very uncomfortable, and yet you do it. You walk and wriggle with all your charm, but as soon as, oh, I don't need that. I'm not that way. What do you wriggle with for then? Hypocrites. I'm an entrepreneur, and I've seen a lot of your sorts. You all want the same thing, only you all act it out differently. So why did you, Anastasia, take off your outer clothes? The weather's not that hot. And then you lolled about on the grass here and with that alluring smile of yours. I am not that comfortable with clothing, Vladimir. I put it on when I leave the woods and I go out among people, but only so I can look like everyone else. I just lay down to relax in the sun and not to disturb you while you were eating. So you didn't want to disturb me? Well, you did. Please forgive me, Vladimir. Of course, you are right about everything. Woman wanting to attract a man's attention, but not just to her legs and breasts. What she wants is not to let pass by the one man who can see more than just those things. But nobody's been passing by here. And what is this more that must be seen when it's your legs that are front and center? Oh, you women, you're so illogical. Yes, unfortunately, that is the way life sometimes turns out. Maybe you should get along, Vladimir. Have you finished eating? Are you rested? The thought crossed my mind. Is it worth going on with this philosophizing wild woman? But I replied, fine, let's go. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. Beast or Man? We continued our journey to Anastasia's home. Her outer clothes left behind in the tree hollow. Her galoshes too. She was still wearing the short, lightweight frock. She herself picked up my bag and offered to carry it, barefoot. She walked ahead of me with an amazingly light and graceful step, waving the bag about her with ease. We talked the whole time. Talking with her on any subject was most interesting. Perhaps because she had her own strange ideas about everything. Sometimes Anastasia would whirl about while we were walking. She turned her face to me, laughing, and kept on walking backwards for a while, quite absorbed in the conversation without so much as a glance down at her feet. How could she walk like that and not once stumble or prick her bare feet against the knot of a dry branch? We didn't seem to be following any visible path. On the other hand, our way was not hindered by the tangled undergrowth so common in the taiga. As she walked, she would occasionally touch or quickly brush by a leaf or a twig on a bush. Or bending over without looking, she would tear off some little blade of grass and eat it. Just like a little creature, I thought. When berries were handy, Anastasia would offer me a few to eat as we walked. The muscles of her body didn't seem to have any unusual features. Her overall physique appeared quite average, not too thin, not too plump. A resilient, well-fed, and very beautiful body. But from what I could tell, it possessed a goodly degree of strength and extremely sharp reflexes. Once, when I stumbled and started to fall, my arms outstretched in front of me, Anastasia whirled around in lightning speed, quickly placing her free hand under me, and I landed with my chest on her palm, her fingers spread wide. There she was supporting my body with the palm of one hand, helping it regain its normal position. During all this time, she went on talking with not the slightest sign of strain. After I had straightened up with the help of her hand, we continued on our way, as though nothing whatever had happened. For some reason, my mind momentarily rested on the gas pistol I had in my bag. With all the interesting conversation, I hadn't realized how much ground we had actually been covering. All at once, Anastasia stopped, put my bag down under a tree, and joyfully exclaimed, "Here, we are home." I looked around. A neat little glade, dotted with flowers amidst a host of majestic cedars, but not a single structure to be seen, not even a hut. In a word, nothing, not even a primitive lean-to. But Anastasia was beside herself with joy, as though we had arrived at a most comfortable dwelling. "And where is your house? Where do you eat, sleep, take shelter from the rain?" "This is my house, Vladimir. I have everything here." A dark sense of disquiet began to come over me. "Where is everything? Let's have a tea kettle so we can at least heat up some water on the fire. Let's have an axe." "I do not have a kettle or an axe, Vladimir, and it would be best not to light a fire." "What are you talking about? She doesn't even have a kettle. The water in my bottle is all gone. You saw when I ate. I even threw the bottle away. Now there's only a couple of swallows of cognac left. To get to the river or the village is a good day's walk, and I'm so tired and thirsty. Where do you get your water from? What do you drink out of?" Seeing my agitation, Anastasia herself showed signs of concern. She quickly took me by the hand and led me through the glade into the forest, admonishing me along the way. "Not to worry, Vladimir. Please, don't get upset. I shall take care of everything. You just rest. Get a good sleep. I shall take care of everything. You will not be cold. You are thirsty. I shall give you something to drink right away." Less than 10 or 15 meters from the glade, beyond a clump of bushes, we came across a small taiga lake. Anastasia quickly scooped up a small quantity of water in her cupped hands and raised it to my face. Here is some water. Drink it, please. What? Are you crazy? How can you drink raw water out of some puddle in the woods? You saw how I was drinking Borzomi. On board ship, even for washing, we pass the river water through a special filter, chlorinated. I ozonize it. It is not a puddle, Vladimir. This is pure living water. Good water, not half destroyed water like yours. You can drink this water just like mother's milk. Look. Anastasia raised her cupped hands to her lips and took a drink. I blurted out, Anastasia, are you some kind of beast? Why a beast? Because my bed is not like yours. There are no cars, no appliances. Because you live like a beast in the forest. You haven't any possessions and you seem to enjoy that. Yes, I enjoy living here. There, you see, you just made my point. Do you consider, Vladimir, that what distinguishes man from all other creatures living on Earth is his possession or manufactured objects? Yes, but even more precisely, his civilized existence. And do you consider your existence to be more civilized? Yes, of course you do, but I am not a beast, Vladimir. I am man. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. Who are they? Subsequently, after spending 3 days with Anastasia and observing how this strange young woman lives all by herself in the remote Siberian taiga, I began to understand a little something of her lifestyle and to be confronted by a number of questions regarding our own. One of them still haunts me to this day. Is our system of education and bringing up children sufficient to comprehend the meaning of existence, to arrange every individual's life priorities in the correct order? Does it help or hinder our ability to make sense of man's essence and purpose? We have set up a vast educational system. It is on the basis of this system that we teach our children and each other in kindergarten, school, university, and postgraduate programs. It is this system that enables us to invent things to fly into space. We structure our lives in accordance with it. Through its help, we strive to construct some happiness for ourselves. We strive to fathom the universe and the atom, along with all sorts of anomalous phenomena. We love to discuss and describe them at great length in sensational stories in both the popular press and scholarly publications. But there is one phenomenon which, for some reason, we try with all our might to avoid, desperately try to avoid. One gets the impression that we are afraid to talk about it. We are afraid, I say, because it could so easily knock the wind out of our commonly accepted systems of education and scientific deductions and make a mockery of the objects inherent in our lifestyle. And we try to pretend that such a phenomenon does not exist, but it does, and it will continue to exist however much we try to turn away from it or avoid it. Isn't it time to take a closer look at this and just maybe, through the collective effort of all our human minds together, find an answer to the following question? If you take all our great thinkers, without exception, people who have formulated religious teachings, all sorts of teachings which the vast majority of humanity are following, or at least endeavoring to follow, why is it that before formulating their teachings, they become recluses, went into solitude, in most cases to the forest, not to some super academy, mind you, but to the forest? Why did the Old Testament's Moses go off into a mountaintop of forest before returning and presenting to the world the wisdom set forth on his tablets of stone? Why did Christ Jesus go off, away from his disciples, into the desert, mountains, and forest? Why did a man named Siddhartha Gautama, who lived in India in the 6th century AD, spend 7 years alone in the forest, after which this recluse came out of the forest back to the people, complete with a set of teachings, teachings which, even to this day, many centuries later, arouse a multitude of human minds, and both build huge temples and call these teachings Buddhism. And the man himself eventually became known to be Buddha. And what about our own not so ancient forebears, now acknowledged as historical figures, men such as Serafim Sarovsky and Sergei Radonitsky? Why did they too go off to become recluses in the forest? And how were they able, after a short period of time there, to so fathom the depths of wisdom that the kings of this world made the long journey through uncharted wilderness to seek their advice? Monasteries and majestic temples were raised at the locations of their respective solitudes. Thus, for the example, the Trinity Sergiev Monastery in the town of Sergiev Posad, near Moscow, today attracts thousands of visitors each year, and it all started from a single forest recluse. Why? Who or what enabled these people to obtain their wisdom? Who gave them knowledge? Who brought them closer to understanding the essence of life? How did they live? What did they do? What did they think about during their forest solitude? These questions confronted me some time after my conversation with Anastasia. After I had started reading everything that I could lay my hands on regarding recluses. But even today, I haven't found answers. Why has nothing been written about their solitude experiences? The answers, I think, must be sought through a collective effort. I shall try to describe the events of my 3-day stay in the Siberian taiga forest and my impressions from my conversations with Anastasia, in the hopes that someone will be able to fathom the essence of this phenomenon and put together a clearer picture of our way of life. For now, on the basis of all that I have seen and heard, only one thing is crystal clear to me. People who live in solitude in the forest, including Anastasia, see what is going on in our lives from a point of view completely different from ours. Some of Anastasia's ideas are the exact opposite of what is commonly accepted. Who is closer to the truth? Who can judge? My task is simply to record what I have seen and heard, and thereby give others an opportunity to come up with answers. Anastasia lives in the forest altogether alone. She has no house to call her own. She hardly wears any clothes and does not store any provisions. She is the descendant of people who have been living here for thousands of years and represents what is literally a whole different civilization. She and those like her have survived to the present day through what I can only term the wisest possible decisions. Very likely the only correct decisions. When they are among us, they blend in with us, trying to appear no different from ordinary people, but in their places of habitual residence, they merge with nature. It is not easy to find their habitual dwelling places. Indeed, man's presence in such places is betrayed only by the fact that they are more beautiful and better taken care of, like Anastasia's forest glade, for example. Anastasia was born here and is an integral part of the natural surroundings. In contrast to our celebrated recluses, she did not go off into the forest simply for a time as they did. She was born in the taiga and visits our world only for brief periods. And on the face of it, there seems to be quite a simple explanation for the strong fear that overwhelmed me and made me lose consciousness when I attempted to possess Anastasia. Just as we tame a cat, a dog, an elephant, a tiger, an eagle, and so on, here everything around has been tamed. And this everything is incapable of permitting anything bad to happen to her. Anastasia told me that when she was born, and while she was still under a year old, her mother could leave her alone on the grass. "And you didn't die from hunger?" I asked. The taiga recluse first looked at me in surprise, but then explained, "There should be no problems of finding food for man. One should eat just as one breathes, not paying attention to the food, not distracting one's thoughts from more important things. The Creator has left that task up to others so that man can live as man, fulfilling his own destiny." She snapped her fingers, and right away, a little squirrel popped up beside her, hopping onto her hand. Anastasia lifted the creature's muzzle up to her mouth, and the squirrel passed from its mouth into hers a cedar nut seed, its shell already removed. This did not seem to me anything out of the ordinary. I remembered how back at the academic complex near Novosibirsk, a lot of squirrels were quite used to people and would beg for food from passers-by and even get angry if they weren't given anything. Here, I was simply observing the process in reverse. But this here was the taiga, and I said, "In the normal world, our world, everything's arranged differently. If you, Anastasia, tried snapping your fingers at a privately run kiosk or even beat on a drum, nobody would give you anything. And here you say the Creator has decided everything. Who is to blame if man has decided to change the Creator's creative design? Whether it is for the better or for the worse, that is up to you to divine." This is the kind of dialogue I had with Anastasia on the question of human sustenance. Her position is simple. It is sinful to waste thought on things like food, and she does not think about it. But for us, in our civilized world, as it happens, we are obliged to give it thought. We know from books, reports in the press, and TV programs of a multitude of examples of infants who have found themselves out in the wilds and ended up being fed by wolves. Here in the taiga, generations of people have made their permanent residence, and their relationship to the animal kingdom is different from ours. I asked Anastasia, "Why aren't you cold when here I am in a warm jacket?" "Because," she replied, "the bodies of people who wrap themselves in clothing to hide from the cold and heat gradually lose their ability to adapt to the changes in their environment. In my case, this capacity of the human body has not been lost, and so I have no need of any special clothing." End of chapter 4.